I'm really invested in the mystery, and I'm really invested in the investigation, and I want to feel like we're doing something active, especially like if there's some way we can help family members who are really struggling and who need that support. But it is really ultimately about trying to better understand the lives that Indigenous people live, and that there's, communities like Sweetwater on the Navajo Nation where an elder can go missing in the middle of the night and never be seen again. I think is just so heartbreaking, and that people don't know that that's happening. People don't understand, like, the circumstances that they have to live in.
Connie Walker is a Pulitzer Prize winner, a Peabody winner, a trailblazing journalist, and, best of all, a friend. She's currently on the cover of The Walrus magazine, and, incredibly, she was named one of Time magazine's 100 People of the Year. In her new podcast, Stolen: Trouble in Sweetwater, Connie explores a crisis of policing in an Indigenous community. She investigates the disappearance of 2 women on the Navajo Nation, a place where people tell Connie that you can get away with murder. To her surprise, Connie discovers a link between the 2 cases, a link that poses troubling questions about the nature of justice on the reservation. Connie, thank you for joining us on Crime Story.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So let's start with the 2 women that you are investigating, or maybe let's just start with the one that you start with, and then how that leads you to the next one.
Yeah. Well, Ella Mae Begay is a Diné elder who was born and raised on the Navajo Nation. She was somebody who, her family told us, like, basically never left home. Like, she maybe took one trip to St. Louis when she was at an Indian boarding school as a child, but her son lived in Denver, and she'd never been to Denver to, even visit. She was definitely a homebody. She was known to be, or is known to be, like a master rug weaver. So she has this tradition of rug weaving in her family. And when I heard about Ella Mae, or when I saw her photo, I feel like that was the thing that really initially grabbed me, because I felt like, she looked like so many people in my own family. And the fact that she was missing and the circumstances around her disappearance really were kind of shocking to me, that she lived alone at home in her community, and that she just disappeared and vanished one night, and that she's never been seen again. And when I heard the story of what happened that night, I also was just it just raised so many questions for me about, obviously, what happened to Ella Mae and where is she and why can't her family find her? But all of the troubling things about what it meant to live as an elder in this community. And the story that we initially heard was that, her daughter was home alone, and they lived right next door to one another. And someone broke into her house.
The daughter's house.
The daughter's house. And she was, hiding in her room while someone was rummaging through her cupboards, taking things to drink. And then she was terrified. And then she heard this person who kicked in her door, leave. And she saw him, walking away, but also in the direction of her mom's house. And she called the police to report this intruder. And I could imagine that, right? If you have that fear, and then you feel like, oh, it must be relief when you can finally dial 911 and call for help. And the police answered, the dispatch answered the call, but the police never responded. They didn't come and help. And then she noticed that her mom's truck started up, and she thought that was so odd, because why would her mom be leaving home in the middle of the night? And she tried calling her and texting her and didn't get any response. And then she saw the truck leave, and she called police again, and this time they finally arrived, but it was too late.
And it's important to sort of place us in the Navajo Nation as well. So can you tell us sort of where it is, and it's quite rural where they're living, right? So they're not, they can't just run to a neighbor's as well. So just give us a sense of where the homes are and what it kind of looks like.
Well, the Navajo Nation is huge. It's the biggest reservation in the United States. It's 27,000 square miles. I don't really know actually what that is. It's giant. It takes,
you didn't go from one end to the other, basically.
Well, we basically, we did to travel around it, but it took hours. It would take a day to travel through. And also just the landscape. It's this desert landscape with mountainous areas, but then also just complete desert and red rock everywhere. It's so beautiful. Like, it is gorgeous, like beautiful. But when we went to Ella May's house, we were so surprised because we got lost. There are no road markers anywhere. There's actually, like, you get to one point where you're like on a paved road and then it just ends. And then from there, and then on, you're basically on a road. And I'm using air quotes, but it's like you can't go like more than like 15, 20 kilometers an hour on these roads. Like, it's so rough. It's a very rough road. And it's so remote. Like, there's not a store around. There's no street lights. There are no house numbers or street names. And so, I think that's part of the issue. Like, immediately you're like, oh, things are different here for sure. Even when you call the police and they do show up, like, it can take, they're only 45 minutes away to the nearest town of Shiprock where the police are. But it can take a lot longer for them to arrive just because it's so hard to find people and they don't have addresses in the way that we do, but also the road conditions. Like, you actually can't go very fast.
So the police do finally show up. Mm-hmm. Ella May's missing. What do the police initially think happened? Where does the investigation start?
Well, it didn't start then. I think that there was, so much of this is like us piecing things together, obviously, after the fact and hearing from different family members who entered, the story at different points. But essentially, I think that initially police didn't really understand that Ella May was missing. They just noticed that her truck was gone and she was gone, but they didn't necessarily think that she was missing right away. It wasn't until the next day when her family was still trying to get a hold of her and piecing things together themselves that they realized, oh, something's really wrong here.
For more interviews like this, subscribe to CBC Podcasts on YouTube or follow Crime Story on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.